2026 will not be your breakthrough year if you walk into it with the same excuses, the same comfort, and the same habits that quietly kept you stuck before. Do not walk into 2026 carrying the same mindset that kept you stuck in 2025. Because if nothing changes up here, nothing changes out there. Let me be blunt. If you enter 2026 waiting to be chosen, waiting to feel ready, waiting for confidence, waiting for the right time, you've already lost. The world doesn't reward potential. It rewards people who move. Stop asking for permission. No one is coming to tap you on the shoulder and say, "You're ready now." Readiness is a decision, not a feeling. And while we're at it, drop the victim story. The fastest way to stay broke, frustrated, or invisible is to believe everything is happening to you instead of because of you. Responsibility is not a burden, it's leverage. The moment you take full ownership of your outcomes, you gain the power to change them. Next, comfort. Comfort is the most expensive drug you're addicted to. Comfort tells you to stay where you are. Comfort tells you to scroll instead of build. Comfort tells you that average is safe, but comfort compounds regret. If you want a different year, you need to be willing to feel a little awkward, a little exposed, and a little uncomfortable. That's the admission price. Now let's talk about how you think. If your mindset is purely consumption, consume content, consume entertainment, consume opinions, you will stay dependent. Producers win, owners win, builders win. Ask yourself, what do I control? What do I own? What value do I create? That's how leverage is built. And stop chasing validation. Likes, applause, and praise feel good, but they don't compound. Results do. Most people are optimizing for attention. Winners are optimizing for outcomes. Finally, urgency. Not panic, not anxiety. Urgency with intention. You don't have time to drift anymore. Every year you delay is a year someone else uses to pass you. So don't enter 2026 thinking small. Don't enter it waiting, don't enter it comfortable, and definitely don't enter it blaming. Enter 2026 decisive. Enter it accountable. Enter it focused on ownership, action, and execution. Because the year doesn't change your life. Your mindset does, and this is the year you stop thinking like a spectator and start operating like a player. Stop waiting for permission, because the longer you wait, the more invisible your life becomes. Permission is a lie we tell ourselves to delay responsibility. You don't need approval, credentials, confidence, or a green light from anyone to start building the life you want. Most people aren't stuck because they lack talent or intelligence. They're stuck because they're waiting to be chosen. Chosen by a boss, chosen by the market, chosen by society, chosen by timing. But the truth is brutal and freeing. At the same time, no one is coming. The world doesn't operate on fairness or readiness, it operates on action. Every meaningful opportunity you admire was created by someone who moved before they felt ready, before they were validated, before it made sense. Waiting for permission keeps you small. It trains you to outsource your decisions, your confidence, and your future. When you wait, you're telling yourself that someone else knows better than you, that someone else has authority over your potential. That mindset quietly erodes self-trust. And once you lose self-trust, you hesitate, you overthink, you ask one more person, then another, until momentum dies. Meanwhile, people with half your skill but twice your decisiveness are passing you without apology. Permission is often disguised as preparation. You tell yourself you're researching, learning, planning, getting ready, but preparation without execution is procrastination dressed up as responsibility. The hard truth is this: clarity comes from action, not thought. Confidence is built after you move, not before. You don't become ready and then start. You start. And readiness is forged in the process. Every rep teaches you something no book, video, or mentor ever could. Waiting also protects your ego. If you never start, you never fail. If you never ship, no one can criticize. But safety is expensive. The cost is regret. Years later, you won't regret the attempts that didn't work. You'll regret the chances you never took because you were waiting for approval that was never required in the first place. Look closely at the people you admire. They didn't have permission. They took it. They made decisions before the path was clear. They risked being wrong, misunderstood, and judged, and that willingness to move without consensus is what separated them. Progress doesn't ask for permission. Ownership doesn't either. If you want a different outcome, you have to adopt a different posture. Stop standing at the door hoping someone opens it. Turn the handle. If it's locked, build another door. The market doesn't reward hesitation, it rewards initiative. You don't need to be special. You need to be decisive. You don't need to be fearless. You need to act despite fear. The moment you stop waiting for permission is the moment your life speeds up. Decisions get sharper. Learning accelerates. Opportunities appear because you're finally in motion. And motion creates leverage. Waiting creates stagnation. So move. Start messy. Start unsure. Start without applause. Because permission was never the missing piece, courage and action were. Drop the victim narrative, because as long as you see yourself as powerless, you will live a powerless life. The victim mindset feels justified, even comforting, because it gives you a story where none of the responsibility is yours. It tells you that your circumstances, your past, other people, the system, or bad luck are the reason you're stuck. And sometimes those things are real. Life can be unfair, people can betray you, and starting points are not equal. But here's the hard truth most people avoid. Focusing on what happened to you will never move you forward. Responsibility is the only position that gives you leverage. When you adopt the victim narrative, you hand over control. You stop asking, "What can I do?" and start asking, "Why did this happen to me?" That question feels deep, but it's paralyzing. It traps you in analysis instead of action, and the longer you stay there, the more your identity becomes tied to the struggle itself. You don't just experience setbacks, you become someone who expects them. Your standards quietly drop. You tolerate things you should change, and you wait for circumstances to improve instead of improving yourself. The victim mindset is dangerous because it sounds reasonable. It hides behind facts, logic, and past experiences. You can always find evidence to support it. Someone else had more money. Someone else had connections. Someone else got lucky. And maybe that's true, but the market life and reality don't reward fairness. They reward adaptability. Power comes from asking better questions, not more comforting ones. The question that changes everything is not who's at fault, but what's my next move? Blame is seductive because it removes pressure. If it's not your fault, then it's not your job to fix it. But that relief is temporary, and the cost is long-term stagnation. Every time you blame something external, you delay progress. You stay stuck waiting for the world to change instead of changing how you operate within it. And while you're waiting, time keeps moving. Opportunities expire, energy fades, momentum disappears. Dropping the victim narrative doesn't mean denying reality or pretending things didn't hurt. It means refusing to let pain become your identity. It means understanding that you can't control what happened, but you are fully responsible for what happens next. That shift is uncomfortable because it removes excuses, but it's also empowering because it gives you options. When you take ownership, you regain agency. You stop being reactive and start being strategic. People who win long-term are not the ones with the cleanest stories or the best circumstances. They're the ones who recover the fastest. They don't waste years replaying the injustice. They extract the lesson, adjust their behavior, and move forward. They understand that resilience isn't about toughness, it's about speed. How quickly you move from setback to solution determines everything. The victim narrative keeps you emotionally busy but strategically broke. You spend energy feeling wronged instead of building leverage. You talk about what should have happened instead of focusing on what will, and the world doesn't reward effort spent on frustration. It rewards execution. The moment you drop the victim story, your standards rise. Your language changes. You stop saying "I can't" and start saying "if I wanted to, how would I?" That single shift transforms obstacles into problems and problems into projects. You move from emotional reactions to practical solutions. Power begins the moment you stop needing sympathy and start demanding results from yourself. Not perfection, not guarantees, just ownership. Because when everything is your fault, everything is also fixable. Quit chasing comfort, because comfort is the quiet force that keeps your life exactly the same. It doesn't ruin you loudly. It doesn't announce itself as a problem. It shows up as routines you never question, habits that feel harmless, and choices that prioritize ease over growth. Comfort tells you that you deserve rest before you've earned progress, that staying where you are is safer than risking embarrassment, and tomorrow is a better time to do the hard thing. And before you realize it, years pass with very little to show for your potential. Comfort is attractive because it feels like stability, it feels responsible, it feels earned. But comfort without growth is stagnation. When you optimize your life around feeling good instead of getting better, you slowly trade progress for predictability. You choose familiar stress over unfamiliar opportunity. You settle for outcomes you don't want because at least they're known. And that decision compounds in the wrong direction. The problem with comfort is that it lowers your tolerance for discomfort. The more you avoid hard conversations, difficult work, and uncertain outcomes, the more fragile you become. Small challenges start to feel overwhelming. Any friction feels like a signal to stop instead of a sign that you're expanding. Growth always comes with resistance. If everything feels easy, you're not moving forward, you're repeating. Comfort convinces you that you have time. It whispers that you can delay, that you can wait until motivation strikes, that the stakes aren't that high. But comfort is a thief of urgency. It blurs the cost of inaction until the bill finally arrives as regret. You don't feel the damage day to day, which is why it's so dangerous. It slowly disconnects effort from ambition. You still want more, but you're no longer willing to be uncomfortable enough to earn it. People who build meaningful lives understand discomfort is not a signal to retreat, it's a signal to lean in. The things that create leverage, learning new skills, building something from nothing, having honest conversations, putting your work into the world, are all uncomfortable at first. That discomfort isn't a warning, it's the entry fee. Chasing comfort also keeps you dependent. When your primary goal is ease, you end up optimizing for short-term relief instead of long-term control. You choose convenience over ownership. You avoid responsibility because responsibility feels heavy. But responsibility is what gives you freedom. The more capable you become, the more options you have. Comfort feels free in the moment, but it costs you optionality in the future. The irony is that avoiding discomfort doesn't eliminate pain, it just postpones it. The pain of discipline weighs ounces. The pain of regret weighs tons. One makes you stronger, the other makes you bitter. One expands your world, the other shrinks it. You get to choose which pain you carry. When you stop chasing comfort, your standards rise. You stop asking what feels easiest right now and start asking what will matter in 5 years. You become willing to do things before you feel ready, to stay in rooms where you feel outmatched, and to push through boredom, fear, and resistance. That's where growth lives. Comfort keeps you average. Discomfort builds capability, and capability is what creates confidence, leverage, and freedom. If you want a life that feels expansive instead of confined, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable on purpose. Think in ownership, not consumption, because the way you use your time, money, and attention determines whether you stay dependent or become powerful. Consumption feels productive, but most of the time it's just distraction with a purpose. You scroll, you watch, you read, you listen, and you tell yourself you're learning. But learning without application doesn't change your life. It just makes you more informed and equally stuck. Consumption keeps you entertained. Ownership changes your position. A consumption mindset is passive. It waits to be told what to think, what to buy, what to believe, and what to want. It reacts instead of creates. And when you live in reaction mode, you're always behind. You're always responding to someone else's agenda, someone else's product, someone else's vision. That's why so many people feel busy but unfulfilled. They're spending their energy fueling systems they don't control. Ownership is different. Ownership means you're building something that exists without you constantly being present. It means you create value instead of just absorbing it. You move from being an audience member to a participant. That shift is uncomfortable at first because it requires responsibility. When you own something, your work, your decisions, your outcomes, there's no one else to blame, but that's also where leverage comes from. Most people underestimate how small our ship can start. They think ownership means massive companies, huge investments, or perfect ideas. In reality, ownership begins with controlling one skill, one project, one asset, one audience, or one system. It's writing instead of just reading, building instead of just buying, testing instead of theorizing. Ownership compounds because it produces feedback, experience, and optionality. Consumption trains impatience. It rewards you instantly with dopamine but leaves nothing behind. You feel busy, stimulated, and exhausted, yet unchanged. Ownership trains delayed gratification. You work now for results later. You trade short-term comfort for long-term control. That's why so few people do it and why it works so well for those who do. When you think like an owner, your questions change. You stop asking, what should I consume next? And start asking, what am I building? You become selective with your attention because attention is an asset. You stop following trends blindly and start looking for problems to solve. You understand that value creation is the fastest path to independence. Ownership also changes how you see risk. Consumers avoid risk because they have nothing to fall back on. Owners take calculated risks because they're building skills and assets that carry forward. Even when something fails, they gain experience, reputation, and clarity. Nothing is wasted. Everything feeds the system. The world is designed to keep you consuming. Endless content, endless products, endless opinions. The default path is easy because it benefits everyone except you. Ownership requires intention. It requires saying no to most things so you can say yes to the few that matter. When you shift from consumption to ownership, your life stops feeling like it's on repeat. You start to see progress. You can measure, control, and improve. You're no longer dependent on motivation, algorithms, or approval. You're building something that grows because you do. Ownership is not about status, it's about leverage. And leverage is what turns effort into freedom. Detach from validation, because the need for approval is one of the fastest ways to give other people control over your decisions. Validation feels harmless. It feels human. Everyone wants to be liked, respected, and acknowledged. But when external approval becomes the measure of your progress, you stop acting in your own best interest. You start optimizing for applause instead of outcomes. And applause is unreliable currency. The problem with validation is that it's inconsistent and outside your control. What gets praised today may be ignored tomorrow. What gets criticized now may later be proven right. If your confidence rises and falls based on other people's reactions, you'll constantly adjust your behavior to fit the room you're in. Over time, that erodes clarity. You stop asking what you actually want and start asking what will be accepted. Chasing validation turns decision-making into a performance. You hesitate before acting, not because the move is wrong, but because you're afraid of how it will look. You delay launching, sharing, or speaking up because you want it to be perfect, impressive, or universally liked. But progress is rarely polished. It's awkward, misunderstood, and often ignored in the beginning. Waiting for validation keeps your best work hidden. Validation also trains dependence. When praise becomes fuel, silence feels like failure. A lack of response feels like rejection, even when it means nothing at all. Algorithms don't reward consistency. People are distracted. The market is noisy. But if you rely on external feedback to stay motivated, you'll quit too early, long before results have time to compound. People who create meaningful outcomes learn to separate feedback from self-worth. They listen to data, not opinions. They measure progress in skill, gained, systems built, and problems solved, not likes, compliments, or recognition. They understand that most people won't notice your work until it's already working. Validation comes after results, not before. The need for approval also keeps you safe and small. You avoid bold ideas because they might offend. You choose familiar paths because they're socially accepted. You stay quiet when you should speak and stay put when you should move. Validation rewards conformity. Growth requires deviation. Detaching from validation doesn't mean ignoring reality or becoming arrogant. It means grounding your confidence internally. You decide your standards in advance. You define what winning looks like for you based on effort, integrity, and progress, not reactions. That internal scoreboard gives you stability. You can take hits without losing momentum. You can work in silence without feeling invisible. When you stop needing approval, you move faster. Decisions get cleaner. You're willing to be early, wrong, and imperfect. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't invested in your outcome. You conserve energy and direct it toward building instead of proving. Most breakthroughs happen quietly. Long before recognition shows up, there are months or years of no applause, no reassurance, and no validation. The people who make it through that phase are not the most talented. They're the most self-directed. Detaching from validation is not about becoming numb. It's about becoming free. Free to build what matters, free to take risks, free to stay the course when no one is watching. And that freedom is what allows results to compound. Operate with urgency, not anxiety, because the two feel similar but lead to completely different outcomes. Anxiety is chaotic. It scatters your energy, clouds your thinking, and makes every decision feel heavier than it needs to be. Urgency is focused. It sharpens priorities, accelerates execution, and forces clarity. One keeps you busy, the other moves you forward. Anxiety comes from fear of the future. It's rooted in uncertainty and a lack of trust in your ability to handle what's coming. When you're anxious, everything feels like an emergency. You rush without direction. You multitask, overreact, and constantly switch strategies. Movement feels frantic, but progress is minimal. You're active, yet stuck. Urgency is different. Urgency is respect for time. It understands that delay has a cost, but it doesn't panic about it. Urgency says, this matters, so I'm going to act now. It's calm, intentional pressure. You move fast on the right things and ignore everything else. Instead of reacting to every signal, you choose your moves deliberately and execute with speed. Anxiety makes you second-guess yourself. You replay decisions, overanalyze outcomes, and look for certainty where none exists. That mental noise slows everything down. Urgency accepts uncertainty as part of the process. It doesn't wait for perfect information. It gathers just enough data, makes a call, and adjusts along the way. Momentum becomes the strategy. People stuck in anxiety often confuse motion with progress. They fill their days with tasks that feel productive but don't move the needle. They respond to messages instantly, attend meetings that don't matter, and chase short-term relief instead of long-term impact. Urgency cuts through that. It forces you to ask, what actually changes the outcome, and then act on it immediately. Operating with urgency also builds confidence. Each decisive action reinforces self-trust. You see that you can handle the consequences of your choices. Anxiety does the opposite. It convinces you that one wrong move will ruin everything. That belief keeps you frozen. Urgency understands that most decisions are reversible and that speed creates learning. Anxiety is fueled by comparison and pressure. You look at what others are doing and feel behind. You measure yourself against timelines that aren't yours. Urgency is personal. It's driven by your goals, your standards, and your reality. You're not racing anyone else. You're racing wasted time. When you operate with urgency, you simplify. You reduce options. You focus on execution over optimization. You stop polishing and start shipping. You understand that progress compounds through action, not perfection. Small, fast moves done consistently outperform slow, flawless plans that never launch. Urgency also protects you from burnout. Anxiety drains energy because it never resolves. There's always something else to worry about. Urgency creates closure. You make a decision, take action, and move on. That rhythm is sustainable. It builds momentum instead of exhaustion. The goal is not to rush your life. The goal is to respect it. Time is the one resource you never get back. Urgency treats time as valuable. Anxiety treats it as a threat. When you replace anxiety with urgency, you stop feeling overwhelmed and start feeling effective. You act with purpose. You move with clarity. And over time, those calm, decisive actions compound into results that frantic effort never could. As you step forward, understand this: nothing outside of you needs to change first. The shift that matters most is internal. When you stop waiting for permission, drop the victim narrative, quit chasing comfort, think in ownership, detach from validation, and operate with urgency instead of anxiety, you stop living reactively and start living deliberately. This is how momentum is built. Not through dramatic moments, but through daily decisions made with clarity and courage. The world will stay noisy. Circumstances will stay imperfect. But your standards don't have to move with them. 2026 doesn't owe you anything, but it will respond to who you decide to be. So enter it decisive, enter it accountable, enter it focused on building, owning, and executing. Because the year won't define you, your mindset will.